Hello, and thank you for joining me. It's Laurel. I hope you're excited to draw with me today. This is a drawing I made in about 15 minutes, and my goal is to make a video that's about 10 minutes to show you that, guess what, you can do this too. It's difficult, but pretty much anything worth doing is a little difficult. There are steps you can follow. Here's the silly thing about art. Every other subject in school you expect to practice. If you're writing, you're gonna write a lot. If you're doing math, you're gonna do a lot of math homework. If you're doing science, you're gonna do a lot of lab work. But art, we go, I'm not talented. I don't know how to do this. But I loved to draw as a kid. I still love to draw, but if I don't practice at it, not so good. You probably don't want to see that sketchbook, but that's what sketchbooks are for. So today, my goal is to walk you through how I made this drawing and give you some steps to follow to take a slightly complicated subject and create a drawing from it. The steps that you follow for this you can use for any subject you want. I'm picking birds because I really enjoy birds. I'm a total bird nerd. So hopefully you're here and you enjoy birds too. Follow along, let's check it out, we'll get started. I have some heavier weight paper because I like to watercolor, and this might become a watercolor at some point in the future. Next thing you need is a pencil. Oh, let's go this way. There we go. Can you see it? There it is. It is an HB or 2B are about the same hardness, and you want your pencil to start off sharper than this. So you might, oh, there we go. Might want to sharpen your pencil up. I use a little handheld sharpener like this guy. Works great. This is me after drawing for 15 minutes, so no problem. Last thing you'll want is an eraser, because I would say about 50% of drawing is erasing. That's how it is. That's just what you do. But I make sure to draw very lightly at first, as I'm mapping out my image, and I can come back and clean up that drawing with my eraser. This one is a kneaded eraser. You could use a pink eraser, you could use a white vinyl eraser. Doesn't matter, just something where you can come back in and clean up those lines as you go. My tools are assembled, so let's speak quickly about images. My image will be online. This was the one that inspired me, but I don't know this photographer, so I need to make sure I pull a copyright-free image to work from for this drawing. Now, how many of you have seen the stupid meme where it's how to draw an owl? Do you remember that one? A circle, an oval, and poof, it's an owl? Yeah. There's a couple more steps, but they're fun, they're not super difficult, and with some practice, you will start having a blast drawing birds and who knows, probably lots of other cool stuff. All right, let's get started. In this first section of the drawing, I am trying to establish the angle or the attitude of the body with just a couple lines. So I've got an angle that goes from the beak to under the eye, so the head. And then I start mapping in the back kind of angle of the neck, and also just one main line for the attitude for the body, that angle, and the tail to establish that. Very basic lines, 1, 2, 3 for the tail. After that, I start drawing in ovals, just like our silly owl. It does actually work. That oval is the general shape of the head, kind of the size and proportion, and then the general size and proportion of the body. And from that, I'm going to start working on a contour line that follows the contours around the head, the neck, the main body, and then eventually the tail. I'm also mapping in a couple of lines to establish where the feet are so that this bird isn't just floating in space. This photo has a nice log or stick that the bird is perched on, and I want to include that so my bird isn't just floating around. This middle section, I am carving away at the contours on this bird. Basically, I'm just chipping away at the general line that I made for a body shape. An oval, a line for a beak, an oval for the body, or a line for the tail. And I'm just nitpicking away, drawing really lightly, coming back and erasing after I've looked for a little bit. And I'm kind of finding, or I almost think of it as carving, the shape of that bird out of the general shapes I've already put down on the paper. I'm also beginning to map in some of the details that make this bird a blue jay and not just any old bird. And eventually, as I start mapping in and liking where these go, I will erase that main first line that was establishing the attitude or the angle for the body. For songbirds, the angle of the beak and the eye, that is such a big deal to establish the attitude for that bird. So in songbirds, that eye is going to sit right on the angle for the beak, or that line for the beak. And that line usually divides the midpoint of the beak. You might have a bunch of beak above it, you might have a little below, you might have a lot below. Depends on the species, but establishing that line helps me figure out where the eye goes. Again, this works really well for songbirds, but can be a little bit trickier for other species. There are little other tricks that I use for stuff like raptors. The next part that I'm working on here is beginning to map out and establish some of the darker areas that make this bird distinctive. So for the blue jay, we have this necklace, we have this eye line, little eyeliner from back here, and then the beak is dark, and there's a dark section. It's almost like a little mask up above the front of the beak. So I'm mapping those in, and I will start getting into some basic shading and contours to help this drawing look a little bit more lifelike once I've got the contours mapped in and I'm happy with that.
Let's watch how the drawing progresses from here. I'm never completely done with the contours, but I am moving on to some of the shapes of the feathers that help give the pattern of the wings. Blue jays have an interesting, almost checkerboard pattern to their wings, and I want to map in the shape. Sometimes it's a little scalloped based on the shape of the feather, and other times it's a little bit more like a ladder, like the bars on the tail. But what I'm doing is essentially just moving around the entire drawing and continuing to add some levels of shading that help carve out some of the features of the bird. I'm still making adjustments to the contour. I didn't like the shape of the head. I think the forehead got too flattened, so I redrew it. That's why I keep my lines light even this late in the drawing. And right now I'm using my pencil, the side of my pencil, in order to add a tone or a shade that's a value darker than the paper, but still fairly light compared to the rest of the drawing. This works better when your pencil is dull, and I have not sharpened this pencil since I began drawing. If you do this with a sharp pencil, it will sometimes leave little pieces of graphite, or it can tear your paper, and that doesn't look very good. So once your pencil is dulled a little bit from the drawing process, you can start using the side of it to add that tone onto sections that need to be a little bit darker. Another thing I work hard to resist is resisting the urge to just put dark down all in one pass. What happens is sometimes I, just like with the contours, will need to change where the dark areas are, or if I put it all down in one pass, I'll do that by pressing too hard with my pencil. And when you press too hard with the pencil, it's going to create a shiny finish. And that shiny finish isn't going to read as well to the viewer when they're looking at your drawing, or if you have to photograph it, it's not going to show up well in a photograph. So you will notice me continuing to go around and darken areas that need a little bit more graphite on it. Also, it's kind of a reminder to me about how much range you can get in just one type of pencil. So again, this is just an HB, it's the equivalent of a 2B pencil, and I can get a really nice range from dark darks to the white of the page if I'm patient. So take your time and move around the drawing. You'll appreciate this as you get closer. You'll be able to make changes that will actually erase back out when you have areas you're not satisfied with, and you'll have nicer darks that aren't shiny. This is getting pretty close. I'm just continuing to move around, map in my darkest darks, some of the areas where there's a bit of a shadow under the wing feathers onto the tail or on the underside of the bird. And I'm going to call this pretty close to done. Again, it's a sketch. It's not meant to be a super long finished project, but it's a great way to get a feel for a particular type of bird in only about 10 minutes of drawing. I spent about 15 minutes beginning to end on this drawing. I'm pretty happy with it. It's got a good contour, it has a nice range of light and dark, and I can tell that it's a blue jay and not a different species. I hope this inspires you to give it a shot. With practice, you'll be able to create sketches that read like your subject in not too much time. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Please follow and check out for more videos in the future.